Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Friday, January the 9th, 2026. So my thumbnail does perhaps contain a hint of exaggeration, days of danger, January 9th, the 9th through to the 11th. What am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about certainly theoretical danger. When I look at a horoscope, when I look at what's going on astrologically, I see stuff that in theory looks really bad, or it could be really bad. We have, for example, the Sun conjunct Mars. We also have, the Sun conjunct Mars opposition Jupiter. Venus is also opposition Jupiter. And, Mars and Jupiter, as a pair, it can be two really very difficult planets. And if you look back at what was going on sort of on previous occasions where you had a Sun-Jupiter opposition, you often find that there is a linkage with quite disastrous events. And so that is certainly something we need to keep in mind. Of course, you've got a problem with astrology that astrologers need to get attention. They need to, give the impression of forecasting dreadful things. That's the way it's always been over the centuries and the millennia even. But theory doesn't always match the practice. So astrologers can be very good at coming up with all sorts of dreadful events, and as it happens, nothing happens. And why would that be the case? Well, very often it is the case in astrology, particularly sort of personal astrology, when you look at a terrible event coming up, when you see a terrible transit coming up in your chart, you focus on this transit for months, sometimes years, and then the magic day happens. You're in dread. You stay in bed, you hide under the bed, whatever it is, and nothing happens. But that is the difference between theory and practice. The horoscope itself is wonderful. It's perfect. You can see the Sun and Jupiter lining up. You can see Mars lining up. Theoretically, it looks terrible, and then nothing happens. So that's perhaps my defense. I have to say that to begin with. When I come up with this video with this rather dramatic title, Days of Danger, January the 9th to 11th. But theoretically, those days from the 9th to 11th, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, of course this is my reading for Friday, but moving into the weekend, it does potentially look difficult. And at the end of this video I'm going to explain why. But first of all, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Friday, January the 9th, 2026. And don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate. So here is the chart for today, set for noon New York time on Friday, January the 9th. So now we can see that the moon is in Libra. So at noon New York time, the moon is at 8:47 Libra. So it's clearly in this sign. It's it made a trine to Pluto at the beginning of the day. It's slowly moving towards a square of Mercury, but the moon is not doing a great deal, so perhaps we can think about the moon in Libra in isolation. So in isolation, well, the moon is in an air sign, and for some of us, that might be good news. The situation elementally is somewhat unbalanced, as I've been saying over the last few days. We've got no planets in air except for Pluto in Aquarius, and of course Pluto is a generational planet. But now with moon moving into Libra, we do get some air for the next couple of days, and with moon in Libra, perhaps there's a chance to think and to be rational, and also to get some perspective, and to perhaps be able to rationalize what is going on, and to be able to maybe sort of discuss things in a kind of civilized way, not just focus on emotions or what things seem to be like on the surface. So I think that that moon in Libra, might be a sort of a welcome break from sort of all of that negativity. When I say negativity, I'm talking about, all of those planets in negative elements, the negative elements being earth and water. Now, the moon is not going to stay in Libra for much longer. A couple of days' time, it'll be in Scorpio, and we'll be back to being in a fairly airless situation. And if you're an air sign like me, with my Sun and Mercury in Gemini, that's something I'm not too happy about. And so this lack of air, well, it's not going to go on for much longer. We're about to get a massive amount of air coming in because Venus and Venus and the Sun, they're already in the last half of Capricorn, and sooner or later they will move into Aquarius. So don't worry, air is on its way, and perhaps when we have all these planets shifting from Capricorn to Aquarius, well, it might be too much of a good thing. There might be too much air, so perhaps it's a question of enjoying the lack of air, while it's around. And so that's the moon and the elements. There are two aspects which are certainly worthy of note. And one aspect we have is a conjunction between the Sun and Mars. So the Sun and Mars have been moving towards a conjunction. Now that conjunction is exact, and the Sun and Mars are two quite sort of fiery planets. They're, of course, both masculine planets, and you put them together and it can be explosive. You might have two forces that don't necessarily agree with one another, and they both want to get their way. And so this could be the clash. Yeah, it's true that Mars will be combust, but it's not like Mercury being combust or Venus being combust. Very often the Mercury and the Venus, Mercury and Venus, maybe they sort of roll over, but not Mars. I think Mars is going to want to fight back, particularly as it's in Capricorn, the sign of its exaltation. So tension levels are certainly going to be increasing with this Sun conjunct Mars. And as far as the personal side of things are concerned, well, as individuals, we always have choices. We have choices about how we are going to react. We don't need to overreact. We don't need to show our anger. Perhaps we can't stop ourselves getting angry, but if we do feel angry and annoyed, we have choices about how we deal with those emotions. On a sort of global level, it is different, and we do know that globally things are getting really tense. We've had this tanker seized by the Americans in the North Atlantic, and people talking about it being, the beginning of war with Russia. I'm not entirely convinced by this. I suspect that behind the scenes, Russia and the United States are talking a great deal about this tanker, and Russians knew what was going to happen, and it was also a tanker that it's kind of changed its flag halfway between its voyage. It's not quite the same as a tanker that started its journey under a Russian flag. That might have been different, but I think there is a certain amount of exaggeration perhaps with this tanker. But we've also got Venezuela and Greenland, and who knows what else. And perhaps it's the unknown we should be concerned about. We're thinking about particular things. We know about Ukraine, we know about Venezuela, we know about Greenland, we even know about Iran. But maybe it's just something else that we hadn't considered. Additionally, we have Venus opposition Jupiter, and this Venus-Jupiter opposition should probably be seen in the context of a wider opposition involving Jupiter, because you can see that Sun, Mars, Venus, they're all opposition Jupiter. And we think of Jupiter as being a sort of quite a benign force. It's supposed to be a fortunate planet, but the reality is that often isn't the case. Jupiter can cause a whole load of trouble. It can exaggerate. It can blow things up. It can be the moment where the bubble pops. And so that's perhaps how we should look at Jupiter. And yeah, you can say something specifically about Venus opposition Jupiter. There is a sense of exaggeration with Venus opposition Jupiter, maybe overindulgence. We can get into particular pleasures, and once we start, maybe difficult to stop. Venus opposition Jupiter, maybe about spending too much money, eating too much, drinking too much. So that is a way in which Venus opposition Jupiter might work. And so, overall, although Venus and Jupiter are both benefics, I wouldn't necessarily regard this Venus-Jupiter opposition as a fortunate aspect, particularly as it's tied up with the Sun opposition Jupiter. And I will be talking about the Sun opposition Jupiter in great detail later in the video. And so that's the picture for New York. If we set the chart for Sydney, Australia at noon. At noon, the moon is at 0 degrees Libra. So that does mean that at the beginning of the day, if you are in Australia or New Zealand, actually the moon will be in Virgo, and perhaps that means that the day won't really get underway until lunchtime or perhaps a late morning. So that is when the moon moves into Libra, when the Virgo emphasis starts to break. Sorry, there's no Virgo emphasis. When the Earth emphasis starts to lose some of its strength. You're no longer going to have 5 personal planets in Earth signs. You'll only have 4, and the moon moves into Libra. And so you might find that after lunch things get easier. There's more to say. Things aren't quite so intense, and you can perhaps sort of rationalize more. So that's one difference between Australasia and the Americas. And then there's a heliocentric view, and I regard the heliocentric view as important, and I'll be talking about heliocentric astrology later in the video. But very briefly, here is the heliocentric picture for today, putting the sun at the center of the solar system. And what is important is that the Earth is now moving towards a conjunction to Jupiter. It's the same as the Sun opposition Jupiter. Now, that conjunction between the Earth and Jupiter doesn't take place until tomorrow, but I decided to talk about it in this video because I want to just talk about other things and the fact that Mars is involved as well. So, we know that we've got Mars opposition Jupiter heliocentrically and geocentrically, but somehow it looks more dramatic from a heliocentric view. And the Earth is opposition Mars, Earth conjunct Jupiter, Venus is involved with it. So I'm perhaps quite concerned about this opposition. This opposition has been getting stronger and stronger. I think we've already started to see the impact of this opposition in terms of global events. And perhaps the one person who most symbolizes it all, who brings it all together, is Donald Trump. Donald Trump is kind of really demonstrating the power of these conjunctions. Maybe it's these conjunctions, oppositions. Maybe we're seeing Trump's Mars rising and his the fact that he's got a full moon in his chart, moon in Sagittarius, opposition the Sun in Gemini. So he seems to be really picking up on it. So I know that some of you are really keen to blame Trump and to say that Trump is being irresponsible and whatever. But if Trump hadn't have been born, he would have had to have been invented. Trump is just an instrument of the cosmos. In his position as president of the United States, this is just the way it is. And blaming Trump is pointless. And as far as the cosmos is concerned, he has a role to play. As humans, we might not like that role, but that's the way it is. And who are we to know? We just don't know. And so I think that Trump is very much picking up on the overall planetary situation. And yeah, so from a heliocentric view, you can certainly see the drama. So I think that although it's been quite a difficult week so far from a global view, I think the end of a week could be quite dramatic. But I will be talking about that later in the video. So now I want to look at things from the perspective of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Friday, January the 9th, 2026. Aries. Today, the Sun is conjunct Mars. This is a big event. I think that this Sun-Mars conjunction is the most important event of the day. And there is a question of whether it is good news or bad news, or perhaps it's a bit of both. So, with the Sun conjunct Mars, you certainly have a strong sense of self. With the Sun really lighting up your ruling planet, and Mars is already quite strong because it's in Capricorn, in the sign of its exaltation. It's in a very high-profile part of your chart, and so with Mars up there in Capricorn, you are able to make things happen. You're not someone to easily be ignored. And then there is the Sun. What actually does the Sun represent? Now, Mars is combust, and there is a view in astrology that if the Sun gets too close to a planet, it can get damaged. And the question is, what is that damage? How would that damage occur? And I think that damage might occur with that Sun conjunct Mars if you maybe take things too far, because the Sun and Mars are both very dynamic planets. And so the Sun might encourage you to take things to extremes. You take things to a level which they really shouldn't go. And, as an Aries, you really appreciate your freedom. And, if your freedom is in any way being blocked, you want to do something about it. And you can be quite good at escalating. And so you have to be careful that you don't escalate too far. Though there is another view with this Sun conjunct Mars to say that it is a Cazimi conjunction. So a Cazimi conjunction is a conjunction which is really close. It's within 17 arc minutes. And yet theoretically, according to some views, a Cazimi conjunction actually strengthens Mars. So, perhaps, as the Sun gets close to Mars, Mars weakens, but when that conjunction becomes exact, there's a sudden spike of strength. And so maybe that's what you're experiencing right now. And, it all depends how you respond to the overall situation. Now, this Sun-Mars conjunction is taking place in Capricorn. So Capricorn is not a crazy sign. It's an Earth sign. And as I've just said, Mars is exalted in Capricorn. So I think, Aries, if you really focus on the right things, if you aren't crazy today, if you understand that there are limits, and you always keep in mind your core goals, if you can do that, then I think today could actually be pretty good. I think that you may be able to accomplish a great deal. And, if you run into obstacles, I think there's always going to be a way around them. You don't necessarily have to charge and sort of go into sort of full sort of battle stations. It's not necessarily like that. And with Mars in Capricorn, if you just keep grinding away, always keep in mind what you're trying to achieve. And it perhaps doesn't really matter how you achieve it, within reason. It's not about pride or ego or people liking you. It's about getting the results. And if you just keep that in mind, and you also show some basic awareness of other people. Remember, Moon is in Libra now. Moon has changed signs out of Virgo in Libra. It's in your opposite sign. And so with Moon in Libra, I think that it is quite important that you take into account the social dimension. It may matter. And so if you ignore other people and think you can do everything on your own, in your own way, and perhaps be quite selfish about it, well, you'll be channeling the worst side of the Sun-Mars conjunction. But if you take the time to understand other people's limitations, remember, Moon in Libra is about balance, and it can be about social balance. Certain people are concerned that things are done properly, that everyone sort of goes through the motions, that things aren't taken to extremes. And so if you can keep that in mind with this Moon in Libra, then I think that you should be okay. So overall, I think it is potentially a pretty good day. I mean, it might even be quite a lucky day. I mean, we have an opposition between Venus and Jupiter, and I said in the introduction that Venus-Jupiter opposition might be not necessarily particularly fortunate, because it might encourage exaggeration, just taking things too far. But on the other hand, Mars is very much tied in with this Venus-Jupiter opposition. So you could then say that, oh, well, Mars is on the Venus-Jupiter midpoint. And so Venus-Jupiter as a pair are quite lucky, particularly if we take the German system, of Ebertin or Witter. You look at the midpoints, you look at the pair. You don't worry too much about the fact that Venus-Jupiter are in opposition. It's just the fact that they're in aspect. So you've got the two benefics in aspect. Mars is on the midpoint, and so that might mean for you successful action, and also being lucky. So if luck is on your side, that means you don't have to exaggerate. You can do things in a natural, spontaneous way. You understand that everything has a time. You don't have to rush it. You just keep going, and in the end, you get what you want, whatever that is. Provided it's legal, provided it's moral, provided it's life enhancing, it can be yours. Taurus. It's a hectic day. It's a hectic weekend. So it's all starting, and all of us are going to be impacted. And as far as you're concerned, Taurus, it's important that you don't take things too far, that you don't, for example, exaggerate. I mean, exaggeration will get you nowhere. It will get no one anywhere. I mean, I was kind of telling Aries just now that it's not a time for exaggeration, and I say the same thing to you. But my reasoning for this is perhaps slightly different, and my logic here is that Venus is your ruler, and Venus is opposition Jupiter. And I know you might think, oh well, that sounds good. Jupiter's a fortunate planet. Venus is aspecting Jupiter. It's got to be great. Well, it's an opposition to Jupiter, to Venus, and Jupiter can be quite indulgent. It can take things too far. It can be indulgent in terms of eating, drinking, spending money, being too nice. Sometimes it's possible to be too nice, to be too trusting with Venus opposition Jupiter. Especially when Venus is still making a conjunction to the Sun. Venus is combust, and when you've got Venus conjunct Sun, that might be about someone not treating you well. Could be about that. And so don't give people a chance. Don't be too generous. I mean, it's always nice to be generous, but with Venus opposition Jupiter, you can take that generosity too much, and you can be generous in such a way that undermines you and perhaps is slightly inappropriate. So don't feel that you have to take things too far. And additionally, Taurus, do try to have some kind of balance. I mean, the moon is in Libra. I mean, Libra is in the sign of the balance, and so with the moon in Libra, that would kind of indicate that you should take it slowly. You can do things, one step at a time. Absolutely, no need for a hurry, and also just take the time to make sure that everything is done properly. And so that kind of links with Venus opposition Jupiter. So with Venus opposition Jupiter, you might want to do everything at once, and instead you should be making some effort to work out what it's all about. What the ground under your feet is like. And what basic preparations need to be done. And additionally with moon in Libra, there's so much going on, Taurus, that you might be pushing yourself too far. There is a time for healing. I mean, healing, maybe physical healing, maybe psychological healing, just making sure that you are, in a physical way, in a bodily way, are really in accord with the environment. Now, you could say, with moon in Libra, okay, moon is in Libra, every month. So does that mean that every month one should make sure that everything is in order, that one should look after one's body? Yeah, probably. But why does it matter so much now? Well, it matters so much now because of Venus opposition Jupiter, perhaps, and the fact that Venus is conjunct the Sun. So if you look at those two aspects, Taurus, it might be the case that you are under more pressure than you realize, and you are taking on too much. And while moon in Libra, from your perspective, might not be that exciting, it does give you a chance to maybe, not take a break, but to do things slowly, to cut things up into sections and know where your limits lie. And so if you do listen to your body and listen to your sort of inner sense of harmony, I think that would be, a very good thing. But still, Taurus, I think that there is a temptation here to take things too far. You want more. You have apparently got quite a lot of energy, but in the process, where are you going to go? Are you going to, burn the ship to get to your destination? I'm thinking of kind of, what was it, Around the World in 80 Days, isn't it? With Phineas Fogg having this boat, and he's desperate to get to the get from America to Liverpool by boat, and he tells the captain to go faster. The captain won't go faster, so Phineas Fogg has to buy the boat and use the wood on the boat to fuel the furnace so it can gather speed. And I do love that imagery. I think it's very dangerous imagery. You might be in so much of a hurry to do something that you mess yourself up. And that's why we go back to the moon in Libra. You need to think about yourself and your health and your well-being, and there's no need to take things to extremes. Now, on a positive note, I mean, I'm trying to be positive, but Venus is combust. Venus is opposition Jupiter, but Venus is finally starting to get away from the pack. Venus is faster than the Sun, it's faster than the Mars, it's certainly faster than Jupiter. So, over the next week or two, Venus can make real progress. And, of all those planets in Capricorn, Venus is going to be the first one, I think, to make it to Aquarius. So if you have been under a lot of pressure recently, this is as difficult as it gets, and I think that for after the weekend, probably a lot of that pressure is going to ease. Gemini. Well, it's certainly a good thing that the moon is moving into Libra. I mean, you've had the moon in Virgo, and I've talked about moon in Virgo from a Gemini perspective, and I don't think I was particularly optimistic about it. I mean, the problem about the moon being in Virgo for you, Gemini, is that there's not enough space, there's not enough room to breathe, and it could be that you just get a bit stuck. And I've certainly been feeling a bit stuck myself with the moon in Virgo. I mean, it's hit me. This moon in Virgo. I mean, I know you don't really care about me, but what happened? Well, a couple of days ago, I smashed my toe. I really smashed my toe. I stubbed my toe. I don't know whether it's broken or not, but apparently it's not deformed, so I don't have to seek medical attention. But it's the worst stub of my toe ever, and it's completely hobbled me. It's difficult to walk. I think it's getting better. But the point about it is, it's not the fact that I hurt my toe. It's the fact that I can't move much. I am sort of, for the moment, stuck in the house. Even just walking shoes is difficult. I mean, I know that I'm probably going to get comments now telling me I should seek medical attention, but I don't think I think the issue is getting better slowly. And I've checked the internet very carefully. ChatGPT says I'm doing the right thing. But the point is, for me, with my sun in Gemini, while the moon is in Virgo, it's been a bit grounding. And I'm sort of assuming that, once the moon moves into Libra, as it is about to do, things will get easier. I will perhaps find it easier to walk around and be more mobile. So I don't want to project, and you will have different ways of dealing with moon in Virgo and experiencing moon in Virgo, but it just may be hard to think about what is happening in the outside world. Things are happening, and you perhaps haven't really wanted to address them. But now that the moon is moving into Libra, well, you have the advantage that the moon is moving into an air sign. We all have the advantage that the moon is moving into an air sign. Gemini is an air sign. We want moon to be in Libra, and the moon is kind of making a trine aspect to Gemini, and of course the moon is making a trine to Pluto. So moon, Pluto, Gemini. There is some space. There's room to think. There's room to breathe, and so I think Gemini, you are going to find that things are easier, and if there's something you want to do, something you've been planning on doing, and perhaps of a creative nature, then now might be a chance to get it off the ground. But I'm not saying it's going to be completely spectacular. The moon having made its trine to Mercury, well, it doesn't do much immediate. Sorry, moon makes a trine to. Well, let's say moon makes a trine to Pluto, then the moon makes a square to Mercury. So that moon square Mercury, that could represent some kind of mental irritation, later in the day, or perhaps into tomorrow. So that's a way of looking at today. So I think that in many respects, this Friday is going to be an overall improvement. And then there is going to be your attitude. And as far as attitude is concerned, well, you're going to have sort of mixed feelings. And, you're capable of seeing the glory of everything. And perhaps even on an emotional level, you can see how wonderful things can be. but you also are very aware that, just as you find something, just as you feel good about something, that is the moment where it starts to decay. And the sort of distinctions, for example, between love and death, that's a sort of very sort of Wagnerian sort of concept. And again, maybe I'm exaggerating here, but the distinction between love and death may, for some Geminis, be important. What is it in German? Is it Leben Tod, something like that? That Wagnerian concept. And so, if there's anything that you're really attached to today, Gemini, then you are also aware that it doesn't last forever, that nothing lasts forever. But if it lasted forever, then how could you be attached to it? And that might be the nature of mortality, that mortality makes things more real. If we indeed live forever, then nothing would have any meaning. We would just become lazy and we'd lose our focus. And so, Gemini, if something is working for you, if there's something you love, something or someone you care about, do live for the moment and enjoy things while they exist. And there's just always that awareness that nothing lasts forever, no one lasts forever. By the way, I'm not making any predictions, any forecasts. I'm not saying that anything bad is going to happen. I'm just talking about your subjective feelings. And so maybe that's a path, an imaginative path of some Geminis, may find themselves going down. And it could be, for example, in a creative sense. I mean, the moon is in Libra. I suppose you could say that moon in Libra says something about creativity. I don't know if you're into Wagner. I mean, I'm not really into music, but maybe things of a Wagnerian theme, with a Wagnerian theme, Wagner himself might have a certain attraction to you at the moment. Cancer. Moon is now in Libra, and with the moon in Libra, you are perhaps feeling that you need to ground yourself. Everyone needs to ground themselves. We live in difficult times. I mean, the next couple of days could be stressful. Not for you in particular, just for the world. At least in theory they are. I mean, that's what I'm talking about in this video. At the end of this video, I'll be talking about, or rather justifying, why I think these days, Friday, Saturday and Sunday, could be dangerous. And you, Cancer, your psychic alarm bells are perhaps ringing, and because of that, you might want to make sure that you are safe and secure. Again, I'm not saying anything bad is going to happen. It's just about your subjective reaction to it all. And so, as far as possible today, seek harmony. Seek a place where you feel you can relax, where you can be yourself, where you don't have to worry too much, and you don't have to do things, other people's way. Other people. There is a lot going on in Capricorn. I've already said there's a lot going on in Capricorn. You've got these 4 planets in Capricorn in your opposite sign, but they're tied up with Jupiter. We have a Venus opposition Jupiter today. We also have Sun conjunct Mars, and that's hitting important parts of your chart. You've got Sun-Mars conjunction in Capricorn in your opposite sign. You've got Venus opposition Jupiter. So that Venus opposition Jupiter is, again, right across the main axis of your chart. So it's important that you maybe understand the role that other people can play in your life, for better or for worse. And some people just cannot be ignored, maybe because they've got larger-than-life personalities. Maybe they just do things, that they do things that you weren't expecting, that you didn't want them to do. And perhaps you have to come in and deal with the problem. It's not really what you wanted to do. And I think that, going back to what I was saying right at the beginning, Cancer, you wanted things to be simple. You wanted to stay out of trouble. And I think you have an inkling that there could be trouble. And so why put yourself at risk? Why give yourself the headache? And so that might be, the right approach. And so some Cancerians, might feel that just by keeping a distance, that's just the best way of handling today. Even if you do keep a distance, the moon does eventually make a square to Mercury, and so moon in Libra square Mercury in Capricorn, that could be about some kind of irritation. Moon Mercury square, well, it can be about communication, what you're talking about, and someone says something, you don't really want to listen, but you kind of have to listen, and it's agitation. And the question is, how much agitation do you want? And maybe there's a bit of choice there. You could just go for glorious isolation and probably get away with it. But you just know that things are going on. And if you know that things are going on, it's difficult to isolate yourself. I mean, at the very least, you might be curious. Or you might think that if you don't know what's going on, then things might get out of control and things might happen which eventually impact you. And so perhaps, Cancer, the best approach is to have a healthy distance from everything, but you've got to keep lines of communication open, because if you don't keep lines of communication open, something might happen which you could have had an influence on, but if there wasn't a line of communication, then you can't influence it. You've got to be in a position to understand what's going on, without necessarily being overwhelmed by it all. So, Cancer, it's not necessarily going to be an easy day, but I think that by adopting the right approach, by having some distance but not total distance, I think you should be able to get through it okay. Leo. The big aspect today is a conjunction between the Sun and Mars. And, this Sun-Mars conjunction, is quite major. I mean, it affects you because, the Sun is your ruler. So if you've got the Sun conjunct Mars, you've also got the Sun moving towards an opposition of Jupiter. Leo, that things are certainly going on, and it can't really be avoided. And also with Sun conjunct Mars, that might say something about you and how you express yourself. It could be, for example, that with Sun conjunct Mars, you really want to be larger than life. You want to make an impression. That might be your priority. But you have to take it slowly. This is Sun-Mars conjunction in Capricorn. And if you want to make the most of this Sun-Mars conjunction in Capricorn, then I think you have to slow things down. And, Mars is in your sixth house. I mean, Mars is in the sixth house from Leo. So if you count, Leo is 1, Virgo is 2, Libra is 3, Scorpio is 4, Sagittarius is 5, Capricorn is 6. And Mars, I believe, it joys in the sixth house. So that's a traditional concept. So the sixth house is not actually a house that Mars minds being in, and it's not a very Leo energy kind of Mars in Capricorn in the sixth house. It doesn't feel very Leonine, but it gives you the ability to decide what matters. And perhaps that is a lot about what is going on. There are lots of inputs. You're not quite sure how to respond. You perhaps want to drift into your imagination and not fully engaged, but you know, Leo, that there are just basic things that need to be sorted out. They may be organizational, and they may actually be related to, health and fitness. And, with Sun conjunct Mars in Capricorn, well, it's possible that you do something that could undermine you physically because you take something too far. That is one of the downsides of Sun conjunct Mars. You overdo it. And it is certainly not a time, Leo, to be overdoing it. You have to have a good understanding of your limits, and you know your limits if you're honest with yourself. With all these planets in Capricorn, you know what you can do, and when you've reached your limit, your body is going to tell you. And so really make an effort to listen to your body. And limits is not just about physical exercise or taking on too much work. It's perhaps about knowing what you can do and what you can't do. There are certain things you're good at. There are certain things you understand. There are other things that you're completely at sea about. If you attempt them, it's simply not going to work. And so that is probably the right way forward. And you don't have to allow other people to push you around. You be encouraged to do something you don't want to do, perhaps be encouraged to do something you can't do. I think at the moment, Leo, you're going to be pretty good at explaining the situation in no uncertain terms. You will make sense. So, Leo, although it is a dramatic day, it's a dramatic few days, and that's a lot about what I'm going to be talking about at the end of this video. The Sun is making a conjunction to Mars. The Sun is opposition Jupiter. Despite all of that, you want to always be in a position where you are fully in control, and you make the decisions. You don't want to be pushed into making a decision or agreeing to something. It's unnecessary. And I do think that you are able to look after yourself, and you are able to explain yourself. And if you don't want to do something, you can really explain why. And I think that you can be quite reasonable about it. And in that sense, you're going to be helped by the fact that the moon is in Libra. Now, the moon is in Libra square Mercury, so sometimes you might find that you don't necessarily get an entirely sympathetic response, but one way or another, you're going to be able to make your point. And in the end, I think that people will understand. Virgo, you can certainly make an impact. And at the moment, Virgo, you're pretty clever. There are lots of things you can do. And once you start doing them, you may really get involved. You could feel a great sense of just satisfaction that you're doing something important, something that matters, and you don't have to worry too much, hopefully, about other people's opinions. Perhaps sometimes you worry too much about what society thinks, what other people think, what your friends think, and that can hamper your creativity. But I do think that is really unnecessary. So if you think about what is important to you and you give it everything, then I think that you can really do something very special. On the other hand, we do have Venus opposition Jupiter. We do have the Sun starting to make an opposition to Jupiter, and those oppositions might represent resistance. Perhaps another person suggesting that you do things in a different way. You're questioned, you're challenged. And the question is then, how do you deal with a challenge? And if you are being challenged, the first thing you need to ask is, what is the other person's motivation? Is someone being critical, or perhaps they may be being constructively critical because they want the best for you? Or is it just a question of ego? Are you dealing with someone just throwing their weight around, trying to undermine you for their own purposes? So you have to ask yourself that question. And from your perspective, it is important that you are creative. You do what you're good at, and you don't listen too much to other people. But you should listen to some extent, and maybe you get some advice. It's suggested to you that you do things in a slightly different way, and maybe that's a good thing. But what you don't want is a situation where your confidence is unnecessarily undermined. And so the question is, how much do you give away? I think that you're certainly prepared to listen. You should be prepared to listen. You should be prepared to accommodate other views without undermining yourself. And so that might be the main theme of today. But maybe other people don't matter. Maybe it's just a day when you can enjoy the fact that you've got 4 planets in Capricorn, and you can really start to make the most of them. And also, you might slowly be thinking about reward. Are you being properly rewarded for what you do? And there's always the right level of remuneration. And as a Virgo, you kind of know what it is. So there could be a financial side to today. And Moon in Libra is making a trine to Pluto. And so with Moon in Libra, trine Pluto in Aquarius, you may be thinking, quite hard about the value of your work, the value of your efforts, not just in the present, but in the past and in the future. If you've done something for another person, are they sufficiently grateful? And perhaps that says something about the future. Virgo is often seen as a service-orientated sign. That's not necessarily how you should see yourself, but it can be seen as a service-orientated sign. But being service-orientated is not the same as being sacrificial. And it's important that you are recognized and appreciated. And I think that this moon trine Pluto may encourage you to just really think again about what you're doing and how people are responding to you, and whether or not you're being appreciated. And if you're not being appreciated, well, what do you do about it? And appreciation takes many forms, and one form of appreciation is simply being paid enough, or, for example, if anyone owes you money, making sure that you are given what is due to you. But I think that's a side issue. I think that fundamentally what matters at the moment is you doing something that you feel good about, and you not being undermined by outside pressure. You certainly know that outside pressure exists. You listen to it, but you're certainly not going to be enthralled to it. In the end, it is your decision. Libra. One of the aspects taking place today, and there are quite a lot of aspects. Well, okay, there are 2 important aspects which are exact today, which are Sun conjunct Mars, Venus opposition Jupiter, quite major aspects. And then over the weekend, we've got Sun opposition Jupiter. So, there is a lot going on. Okay, it's about perhaps quality rather than quantity. These are important aspects. They are taking place in cardinal signs. Libra is a cardinal sign. And, as far as, today is concerned, Venus opposition Jupiter certainly needs to be talked about. So with Venus opposition Jupiter, there are a couple of things to think about. Firstly, Venus is opposition Jupiter. I mean, you've got a conflict here, potentially. I mean, I know that Venus and Jupiter are supposed to be fortunate planets, but they are in opposition. And so, you might say that there may be a temptation to exaggerate, to take something too far. And, the question is, what might that be? It could be some vice, something you know you shouldn't be doing, but you just you can't help yourself. So that is a way in which a Venus-Jupiter opposition, could be manifesting. But I would, prefer to see it in a sort of a grander way. To say, Jupiter is in Cancer, and Jupiter has been in Cancer since last summer. It's a great place for Jupiter to be, all things being equal. And given this placement, it is a time, Libra, when you should be really projecting yourself. This is a message that I make constantly when doing my forecast for Libra. You should be thinking about what it is that you want to do, what kind of impression you want to make on the world. But, Jupiter is in conflict with Venus, and it's in opposition. And so the issue here is that, Venus right now, or rather you right now, you're not necessarily in the mood. You just want to do things your way. And you perhaps at the moment don't want to expose yourself to too much danger, too much aggravation, too much social risk. And Jupiter is saying, well, no, you've got to make a greater effort. And perhaps Jupiter has a point. So, you can be very focused on one thing, and you can be quite insular, but there's a danger that you've taken things too far, or you are taking things too far. And with this Venus-Jupiter opposition, you are perhaps being encouraged to get things together, to start to think about what it is you want to do by the summer. Because Jupiter is not going to stay in Cancer forever. It will eventually move into Leo. So what are you going to do? How are you going to organize yourself? And it may be a challenge that takes place largely on a mental level. It's not necessarily that you have to do anything, but you do have to be aware that action is required at some stage. And thinking about action, well, that something needs to change, and sort of deep down your energy levels are starting to rise. You don't really want to just be doing nothing. And so perhaps Jupiter is providing some very useful encouragement. And in fact, it's not just about Jupiter. You could say that it's about Mars as well. So we just had a conjunction between Venus and Mars, and I talked about it at some length yesterday. And you're just now going into this opposition to Jupiter. So you're kind of between the conjunction of Mars and the opposition of Jupiter. So the combined Mars-Jupiter energy is very much with you, and so there is surplus energy. And if you were to do nothing, if you were to just stay in one place, if you were to kind of avoid anything that's at all dangerous or stressful, that energy hasn't gone away. It's kind of still working in the background. And maybe if you don't acknowledge that energy, it could start to work in ways you weren't expecting. So I think, Libra, as far as is possible, you should have an active day, not a crazy active day, but a day when you are using up your energy in a way that is constructive. And I think that if you do that, you'll be able to sort of harness the power of the planets, because there is a lot going on. There's a lot going on involving Venus. The fact that Venus is conjunct Mars still. It is opposition Jupiter. And there is a conjunction between the Sun and Mars as well. So that Sun-Mars conjunction is very likely to have an impact on you. And it could have an impact on you via another person. So the Sun-Mars conjunction, we could see that as being representative of a person who is quite strong-willed, and they are very determined, and perhaps they're too determined, and they could get themselves into trouble. And that might say something about Some of the people around you could be about a family member. So, think about the people around you and what they're doing and what kind of energy they're generating. And I think there are a couple of people who want action, and it's important that that action sort of is able to manifest in a constructive way. So not everyone can be trusted, and in a sense, not they can't necessarily be trusted to do the right thing, to act in a sensible way. And all the while the moon is in Libra. The moon is moving into your sign, and with the moon in Libra, I think that certainly provides a silver lining today. I mean, there are a number of silver linings today. I'm not even saying it's a difficult day. It needn't be a difficult day, but with the moon moving through Libra, you have a certain sense of balance. So regardless of some of the pressures taking place over the course of the day, you're not going to completely lose touch with everything. And I think that this sense of balance can be projected onto other people as well, and they can understand what you are generating and what it is that what it is that you're looking for. And so don't necessarily keep your feelings to yourself, and in some respects you can be, Libra, a stabilizing influence. Scorpio. Today there is a conjunction between the Sun and Mars. I mean, this Sun-Mars conjunction has been brewing for some time, and it's a conjunction that it needs to be handled with a certain amount of respect. And don't forget, Mars is your ruler. So you could say then that Mars is combust. It's very close to the Sun, and combustion can be a problem. You could be overwhelmed by it, and as I think I said yesterday, you don't want to take things to extremes. You don't want to go too far. But with Sun conjunct Mars, there is perhaps a danger that you go too far. You decide something is important, and you decide it's worth all your energy, and you put all your energy into it, and in the end it could become exhausting, and you could burn yourself out with Sun conjunct Mars. I mean, that is Sun conjunct Mars at its worst. But there is another way of looking at it. The Sun is so close to the conjunction of Mars that it's a cazimi conjunction. Cazimi within 17 arc minutes, depending on who you read. And so you may benefit from that Sun conjunct Mars. And so that Sun conjunct Mars, Scorpio, can give you real energy and focus, and you can decide that something is important and you just want to give it everything. And perhaps it's all about choice. I mean, you might decide that the wrong things are important and put huge amounts of energy into something that in the end just blows up. Or you might make the right choice. And so, Scorpio, it's probably a day for only doing one thing. And the success of today somewhat depends on your choices. So if you choose to do the right thing that is in accord with who you are and is in accord with the demands of the time, then I think you should be fine. So try to make the right choices. And if you just get obsessed with something that is really not worthy of your time, then you could just keep going and you could keep wasting a lot of time, and you could exhaust yourself. So this Sun-Mars conjunction certainly needs to be treated with respect. But if you do make the right choices, Scorpio, which I think you probably will, then I think that you're going to have more than your fair share of luck. Yeah, you can be lucky today. Things will go your way, and that is, of course, a sign that you're doing the right things. If you act in accordance with the universal will, then what can go wrong? well, probably nothing can go wrong. Now, as far as relationships are concerned, we always have to think about Venus. Venus being ruler of Taurus, your opposite sign, and Venus is conjunct the Sun, and it's also opposition Jupiter. And so, with Venus opposition Jupiter, that might say something about other people's behavior. And if you're in a close relationship, look at what the other person is doing. Are they taking something too far? It may not be just you who is the extremist or has the potential for being an extremist. It may be the other person. But extremism has many forms, and Venus opposition Jupiter can be a very generous combination. And it could be, if we try to look at Venus-Jupiter opposition in the most positive way, we may be talking about someone who is quite overwhelming in their generosity. They want to sort of give of themselves, and that is something you can be aware of. And perhaps some people are too generous, and you don't want to be in a position where you're taking advantage of another person's generosity. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I'm just saying it could. And so do think about Jupiter as a planet of exaggeration, and how that might influence another person. And you don't want someone to mess themselves up by maybe being over generous, or perhaps by spending too much. Venus opposition Jupiter is quite an indulgent aspect. I don't think you are impacted by that indulgence, but I think you need to perhaps look at what another person is doing. Looking at what another person is spending money on. So if you see someone spending money, don't just say to yourself, well, that's their issue. They can spend their money on what they like. Maybe there's something else going on. And if you have a message of frugality that you want to give, then now might be the time, because someone might be taking things too far. Sagittarius. Right now, the moon is moving out of Virgo. Well, it's moved out of Virgo already, and the moon is now moving into Libra. And so with the moon moving into Libra, making a trine to Pluto, that's quite easygoing. I know that moon trine Pluto doesn't sound very easygoing, but it's a trine. And so with the moon trine Jupiter, in some respects, Sagittarius, you can be more relaxed and easygoing at a time when other people may not be at all easygoing. We've got some serious things going on today. We have got we've got the Sun conjunct Mars, we've got Venus opposition Jupiter, and some people are taking it very seriously. The question is, are you taking it seriously? Do you need to take it seriously? And I think that you do have a light touch, perhaps a light touch that in the past had passed you by, but now it's very much sort of with you, and you can be sort of gently sociable, and you don't have to push things, and you can be tolerant. I mean, hopefully you can be tolerant. I think there's no reason why you can't be. I think that you're not necessarily always going to rush to judgment, but Venus does opposition Jupiter. I mean, that's relevant perhaps because Jupiter is your ruler, and so how could Venus mess you up? You don't normally associate Venus with messing you up. Well, the Sun is about to opposition Jupiter as well, and I don't know how much you're going to feel that. I mean, I know it is Jupiter. I know it's your ruler. I mean, Venus opposition Jupiter, Sun opposition Jupiter. There could be a financial element to that. I mean, you could argue that Venus opposition Jupiter is about over expenditure. You have money, you spend money, you perhaps lose touch with the money you're spending, or something is more complicated than you realize, and you're still spending money. So perhaps on a practical note, Sagittarius, it might be a good idea to look at your expenditure, to look at what you're spending money on, perhaps looking at all those sort of monthly bills. I suspect that's the key to bankruptcy. They're always telling you, aren't they, that it's just going to cost you this amount a month. It's going to cost you, and then there are always demands or requests. It's just that. It's just $5 a month. It's just $10 a month, and all these monthly payments, they just build up until it just destroys you. So do look at how you are spending money. With Venus opposition Jupiter, and you might be spending money in surprising ways. And now might be a chance to, as a result, well, at least as a result of your awareness, be able to stop yourself in your tracks and to realize that a lot of your expenditure is perhaps unnecessary. But yeah, I don't want to give the impression it's all about money. And as I said, the moon is in Libra, and I think that with the moon in Libra, you at least can give the impression of being pretty easygoing, and I think that people are going to like you. And it's good that the moon is moving into an air sign, and so just having gentle conversation, not taking anything too seriously. Yeah, that's what people want, because we are living in serious times, and I do think that. And if someone can be light-hearted and not get obsessed about heavy issues, I think that is going to be appreciated. And so I think that you can really make the most of the moon in Libra, and in the process have a gently transformative impact, because the moon is making a trine to Pluto. So moon trine Pluto means that perhaps through your words and through perhaps your actions as well, you can create change, and that change is going to be welcome. And perhaps, people have been taking things too seriously, and you can maybe help other people to relax, and helping other people to relax to an extent that might be a transformative process. Capricorn. We do have a lot going on, as I've been telling you for the last few days, and we have, for example, Sun conjunct Mars. This Sun conjunct Mars is in Capricorn. It's been building up for some time, and so these two quite sort of dynamic masculine planets coming together in Capricorn could have an impact on you. They may allow you to be fairly dynamic and be able to really project yourself with power, confidence, and conviction. And perhaps it's a question, Capricorn, of feeling that you don't actually have to use too much energy. You don't have to exhaust yourself. It could be that the Sun-Mars conjunction is almost self-sustaining. So once you apply yourself to something, it just keeps going, and it's all about, you make the start, you initiate it, and then it's just an ongoing process, and you can just step back and watch it happen. You can watch it unfold. You can watch yourself unfold, and if there is anything you want that is important to you, then I think that you should be able to really find ways of getting it. But don't be tempted to take things too far. I mean, that's a problem that maybe a lot of people are having at the moment. And the Sun is making an opposition to Jupiter. Venus is making an opposition to Jupiter. Jupiter's in Cancer. Jupiter's in your opposite sign, and so there is a possibility of indulgence. I don't think it's necessarily you being indulgent. It might be another person. So there may be today another person that has to be dealt with, has to be managed. This person, might well be a force for good, but they're still challenging. They're perhaps challenging you to perhaps project yourself more than you necessarily wanted to do. So if you started the day thinking that it was going to be easy, that you weren't going to have to push yourself, that you weren't for example, going to have to raise your voice, well, maybe you should be thinking again, because there are things going on. There are people who just can't be ignored. But don't forget about yourself. and don't forget about what is important to you. As we move into the weekend, the moon is making squares to the Capricorn planets. I mean, moon's in Libra, remember. In fact, today, Friday, the moon will be starting to make squares to the Capricorn planets. Moon, certainly if you're in the Americas, you might be feeling the moon making a square to Mercury. Then Saturday it will make squares to the Sun, Venus, Mars, and I regard those squares as being pretty positive. All those squares for you. I think that Capricorn, this allows you to not just project your personality, but also to project your desires and your will. What is it that you want to do? What is it that you want to accomplish? And I think you can project it very well, and you can project it in such a way that doesn't cause problems. I don't think that people are going to be offended. I mean, people are going to be quite willing to listen to you and accept what you have to say. And if it's something you want, don't be afraid to ask. I think that in most cases people will just comply without really complaining. Aquarius. It's maybe a bit of a relief that the moon is moving into Libra. We've had this problem I don't know if it's a problem. Depends how you're managing it all. But we have had this issue that there have been no planets in air signs except for Pluto, no planets in fire signs except for Chiron, but now the moon is moving into Libra, and so with moon moving into Libra, moving into a fellow air sign, it gives you space that just before perhaps hadn't existed. You felt that you were very enclosed and that there wasn't really the ability to do anything. Well, that is changing to some extent. I think that more opportunities are becoming open to you, and you can start to see possibilities, whereas in the recent past you might have just seen quite a few dead ends, though you will have to understand the constraints of the astrological environment. We do have a conjunction between the Sun and Mars. That Sun and Mars can be quite a heavy influence. And for you, that Sun and Mars might be about your own anger, about you feeling that you can't do everything that you want to do. Well, of course you can't do everything that you want to do, but things are changing. And if you take things slowly, then I think you will start to see progress. If you take things too fast, then you could quickly run into resistance. There is just something holding things back. Maybe it's the fact that there's so much Earth. Maybe it's not okay. We don't have quite as much Earth as we had yesterday, because now we don't have the moon in Virgo. But still, with those 4 planets in Capricorn, that perhaps represents the dense nature of matter, and it's difficult to move things. It's difficult to make progress in terms of the material world. It might literally be the material world. You're trying to sort yourself out, and there are so many obstacles. It may be just cardboard boxes or some other form of clutter, and you can't make progress. Maybe it's like trying to move through space. You think you've got a clear path through space, and then you've got all these asteroids and lumps of rock to deal with, and you have to slow down and negotiate each lump of rock, because if you were to go at the speed of light or warp speed or whatever, you'd smash straight into the rock. So do take it slowly. Take one lump of rock at a time, and also realize that you are making progress. So if you're crossing an asteroid field, at least you're getting across the asteroid field, but you're just getting there slowly, and you will in the end get through those asteroids, and you'll see this clear space in front of you. And of course, clear space, what do they think? Star Trek, New Frontiers and all that. I mean, that's perhaps what Moon in Libra is about. I mean, I know it's just Moon in Libra, and I don't want to exaggerate, but, the Moon is making a trine to Pluto, and in a very long-term sense with Pluto in Aquarius, we are perhaps talking about new frontiers. We're talking about the new, and perhaps getting through to the new, isn't always easy, and, you have to deal with lumps of rock, but in the end, you get past it all, and you have a sense of your own freedom. And today, I think you are getting an idea of how things can be. And just don't forget, very soon, a couple of weeks' time, there'll be a load of planets moving into Aquarius, moving into your sign. And so start gearing up for it. And with the Moon in Libra, maybe today and into the weekend, you're going to start to be aware of what is possible. Pisces. An active day, as I've been telling everyone, perhaps a stressful day as well. I mean, think about Jupiter. I mean, Jupiter is your ruler, and Jupiter is opposition Venus. It's also opposition the Sun. And the Sun opposition Jupiter, well, I think that's exact tomorrow, not exact today, but it's pretty close. And so as far as the stress is concerned, I think that other people are going to be probably in general more stressed out than you. And so when we're talking about stress, we're talking about the general picture. But with the Sun making a conjunction to Mars, that Sun-Mars conjunction taking place in Capricorn, you might just become aware of perhaps what other people are going through and how they are responding. People respond in different ways, and if you are with other people, then notice their behavior, notice what they're doing, notice what they're trying to achieve, notice what they're holding back, because there is tension. So being a Pisces, you're quite a sensitive person, and so if you feel the environment is tense, then you kind of know why. It is because perhaps there is this conjunction between the Sun and Mars, that everyone is trying to assert themselves. This is a time for assertion. We're starting to move towards a time of assertion. And look at Neptune. I mean, Neptune is about to move into Aries. And one thing we need to think about with Neptune, just as a reminder, this isn't really relevant to you, Sagittarius, but I just wanted to ask myself, how close is Neptune to Skeet? Because I've talked about this fixed star Skeet that Neptune is on, and so Neptune is only 7 arc minutes from Skeet. So over the next few days, Neptune's going to be getting closer and closer to Skeet, and that could represent some huge event. Again, not affecting you, but I thought I would just point that out anyway. That people are just beginning to feel it all, and you're starting to feel it all, and you're starting to feel how they are feeling it. So it's kind of might be sort of secondhand feelings. You're feeling how other people are feeling, and so you just get an idea of how difficult things are, but fundamentally it may not be your problem. Now, one aspect we do have today for sure is Venus opposition Jupiter, and Jupiter is of course your ruler. So with Venus opposition Jupiter, my hunch is that Venus opposition Jupiter would be about other people or some other person making their influence felt, or trying to make their influence felt, not necessarily in a helpful way. So you, Jupiter in Cancer, you have your ideas, there are things you'd like to do, but not everyone agrees. And tomorrow, Saturday, I think you've got Sun opposition Jupiter. So Sun and Venus opposition Jupiter is perhaps asking you to explain yourself, or the suggestion that maybe you're being too selfish, maybe you're not thinking about the collective. And these pressures are there, but you don't have to give in to these pressures. You are yourself. It's important that you are yourself. Remember, North Node is in Pisces. North Node is in your sign. So yeah, you've got to hold firm. And I don't think it's a day for giving in. Why should you give in? Other people have their issues, and maybe they've got a lot of issues, but they don't necessarily have to dump those issues onto you. And if you have something you want to do, then I think it is important that you not just get on with it, but also that you enjoy yourself. Enjoyment does matter. I mean, that's part of a message of Jupiter in Cancer. Jupiter is your ruler. It's in Cancer. It's exalted in Cancer. I know Jupiter's retrograde. It doesn't matter. It's about you making the most of what is in front of you and making the most of what you've been given in this life. And you don't want other people irritating you, trying to make you feel guilty. Yeah, sure, you can go through the motions of showing that you're listening, but in the end, it's you making the decisions. And I think it is important that you do put yourself first, and that is a message for Pisces, not just about today. I think it is a message of this period of time that we're in. So those are my forecasts for the 12 signs, and now it's time to look at things from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Friday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 12, which is standstill. Not a great hexagram. Everything is kind of in the wrong place. You've got the top half of the hexagram, 3 unbroken lines. The top half of the hexagram perhaps represents heaven. It's heavenly. Bottom half of the hexagram, the earth, 3 broken lines. So there's a separation between the top half of the hexagram and the bottom half of the hexagram. And it is as if heaven has shut the trap door. And, if you can perhaps get into that in some sort of Kabbalistic idea about, if you get into the fall, and if you, when man is fallen, and, heaven has shut the gate, or perhaps Adam and Eve are thrown out of the Garden of Eden. It's just heaven protecting itself, and that may be one way of looking at it. But you could also see it as just things are not moving. We're dealing with dense matter, and it's just difficult, and also it might seem that inferior people are on the rise. The I Ching likes to talk about inferior people. I'm not saying they are inferior. I'm just saying that's the kind of way the I Ching looks at it. Perhaps people who don't deserve credit are getting credit, and overall it just might feel that absolutely nothing is going on. I mean, of course, things are going on, and we have 2 moving lines, and the 2 moving lines, the 4th line moves and the 6th line moves. And so the 6th line being the top line. And, the 4th line is actually indicating that things are getting better. We do get periods of standstill. That's just the way it is. And it's part of the grand cycle. And it does seem that, things are coming to an end, that things are starting to move, and it just needs someone perhaps with authority to say, enough of this, let's get going. Maybe you can be that person in authority. You can be the person who leads everyone forward, who can show that enough is enough, that we do have to start moving, and then the top line moves. And again, that's more of the same. The period of standstill is coming to an end, and there is again an indication that it requires the right person. And it's possible in the process of ending a standstill, maybe it's someone with authority, someone with power has to stand up and take responsibility. So that might be you. So I don't know what's going on in your life today, but if you feel that things are stuck, then through your own efforts, you can get them to move. Now, that doesn't mean forcing anything. That's absolutely what you must not do. I mean, I'm saying that, well, you've got the Sun conjunct Mars astrologically, so it's not about saying something doesn't work, let's use force. It's about just exercising your authority, understanding the situation, and slowly things start to move. The ice starts to melt and we get progress, and we move to a second hexagram, and the second hexagram we move to is hexagram number 8, which is holding together. And this indicates that if you're trying to make progress, it may be a collective venture. You need other people to cooperate. If you've got different people, they're isolated, they have no connection with each other, then the forces of disintegration will triumph. But if people hold together, hold firm, and support each other, then you make progress. Everyone makes progress. So, that kind of depends on your situation. But, if you are with other people, if it's a wider problem, it's not just you, then you really try to engage other people, get their cooperation. If you're on your own, if you really are on your own, you're dealing with something which seems to be stuck, well, you can still hold together. I mean, you can still get some advice, I assume. You can talk to people, explain the problem. If there is a problem, maybe you can talk to someone about their problem, or it may be some general problem. It might be to do with activism. There's always something going on. There's always a deadline. I mean, if you, in American cities, there's always a deadline for some planning decision. If you want to make a complaint, you've got to, or make a public comment, or make any comment, you've always got a deadline. I know there's some deadline today that I'm supposed to write an email about. People holding together. Is it worth it? Well, that's always a question, isn't it? Is political action worth it? But, holding together certainly has a political dimension to it. So if you are politically involved, then it's quite easy to interpret this. Previous hexagrams stand still, things are stuck, you've got no power, you can't get anything done. But holding together, other people have the same problem, other people are angry about the same things, and they can come together and perhaps create real change. Or at the very least, if you're talking about political action, they can sort of burn off some of their anger. I mean, it is an angry day. I mean, we know that sort of astrologically. We know that there's a Sun conjunct Mars, but we just mustn't let anger get in the way. Also, I mustn't mix up the I Ching and astrology too much. That's not something I want to do. But, in the end, if you possibly can, do get on with other people, see what other people have to offer. And perhaps it is a situation where collectively you are aware of your strength. And I want to finish by looking at some of the events of the last few days, and also trying to justify the thumbnail. Why did I say days of danger? I mean, that is dramatic, and possibly it's over dramatic. So let me show you what I'm talking about. What is bothering me? Well, I've already shown you what's bothering me, and you can perhaps judge for yourself. Remembering that with astrology, there's so much scope for exaggeration and hyperbole, and probably me having made such a big effort to highlight the next few days as being days of danger. Absolutely nothing will happen. That's always a danger, being an astrologer. But we're talking about the theoretical picture. So, from a theoretical perspective, let's look at today. So, I'll show you what I'm thinking about, and what is bothering me. And so, Okay. So here's a chart. Let me just put Aries on the left. So we know that we've got 4 planets in Capricorn, but in particular we've got these 3 planets forming a conjunction: Venus, Sun, and Mars. And everyone into astrology has been aware of this conjunction. Lots of videos have been made about this conjunction, saying what a completely dramatic event it is. Well, the question is, how is it going to be a dramatic? What does that actually mean? We've already seen the drama. I really think so. I think that this week, whether it's oil tankers in the North Atlantic, Venezuela, Maduro, Iran even, I'm not convinced about this Iranian protest, talking about high prices. People are, a lot of people are trying to say, well, this is the end of the Iranian regime. I'm not convinced. I'm not saying it on the basis of astrology, by the way, but clearly Iran is a bit of a hotspot at the moment, and of course Ukraine, Russia. There's always stuff going on there, and so for sure this conjunction is working out. It's been a very explosive start to the year. But what happens now? Why is the end of the week so important? Well, today, Friday, we have Sun conjunct Mars. I mean, Sun and conjunct Mars is a very explosive combination. It really is. Okay, it's not in Aries. So it is perhaps could be more explosive. It's in Capricorn. Maybe Capricorn moderates it to an extent. But if you forget the signs, you've got these 2 fiery masculine planets coming together, and that could indeed be quite explosive. And you throw Venus in there as well. Okay, you might say, oh well, Venus is the planet of peace. Is it? I think that Venus could be the planet of war. I've argued this, that if Mars is a planet of war, Venus is a planet of victory. It's perhaps the female side of war. And you could associate Venus from a Celtic perspective with perhaps Morrigan. Morrigan is, one of her symbols, this Celtic goddess. Is it the Morrigan? I think she's sometimes called, to be strict about it. She's represented by the raven, and the raven has these manifestations. I think that one sort of myth about Morrigan, in the evening, the night before the battle, she is the seductress. She is with the warrior, tending to the warrior with her feminine charms, and then the day after, she is a raven, picking at the body of the dead warrior who she was with the night before. So that is a side of Venus, and perhaps one reason why one might see Venus as being quite warlike. But she's perhaps also the planet of victory, Nike, or which is the Roman equivalent is Victoria. So Venus wants its way. So there is a sense that when you throw Venus and Mars and the Sun together, you get sort of potentially quite dramatic effects. But what really clinches it is Jupiter. We've perhaps been forgetting about Jupiter, but this conjunction between Sun, Venus, and Mars is opposition Jupiter. And it's tempting to see Jupiter as being a benefic. Maybe. Jupiter can be a very difficult planet. And, with Mars opposition Jupiter is arguably the worst aspect in the book. Charles Carter, I think it was Charles Carter, wrote a book about aspects, I think in the 1950s, maybe earlier. He was a sort of great mid-20th century astrologer. And he said, I believe that Mars opposition Jupiter is a really awful aspect potentially, because Mars is about anger, and you put Jupiter in with it, and it just doesn't know when to stop. It's about violence, it's about war, it's about just having no limits. And so it can be associated with atrocities, accidents, however you want to see it. So that's nothing much to be excited about. Mars opposition Jupiter, well, you can be excited as a casual observer if you're not involved. So Sun opposition Jupiter, Mars opposition Jupiter, Venus opposition Jupiter, it's all coming together. And it's all coming together, over the next few days. That's why I've highlighted 9th to the 11th on the thumbnail of this video. And so I think theoretically there is an argument for saying that these next few days, again, in theory, could be the most dangerous days of the year. Now, there is a positive side to that. It doesn't necessarily get any worse. This could be when the balloon pops, when this massive period of tension that's been building up at the beginning of the year finally dissipates once the weekend is over. Perhaps, to be safe, let's move into Monday. But once Monday's over, maybe things will start to improve. I mean, I'm not saying they are, but it is all really very, very dramatic. And so one way of looking at this, and one aspect I really want to particularly focus on, is the Sun-Jupiter aspect. So, in the 80s, when I was learning astrology, I remember I went to this class on midpoints and harmonics. I think it was either 1986 or 1987. And it was taught by an astrologer called Mike Harding. And he co-wrote a book called Working with Astrology with Charles Harvey. I mean, I'm sure you can still get copies of it. It's really good on midpoints and harmonics. But I think, if I remember rightly, Mike Harding made the point that you really should be looking at Earth-Jupiter conjunctions. So he would have, I don't know quite why he mentioned this. Maybe we were talking about disasters or Chernobyl. I can't remember. I mean, there was not an Earth-Jupiter conjunction at the time of Chernobyl, but I think he was saying, look at the Earth. And, in the 80s, people were using heliocentric astrology. I mean, in some respects, astrology was more technical, was more sophisticated in the 1980s than it is now. I mean, that's a terrible thing to say, but I think there is a case to say that people were more interested in using other techniques like midpoints, but which is kind of ironic, isn't it? You have computers, you have the ability to use all these techniques, but I don't think a lot of people are using them. Anyway, the heliocentric conjunctions between the Earth and other planets, should absolutely not be ignored. And the Sun opposition Jupiter is the same as Earth conjunct Jupiter, and so you can certainly see this if you look at the heliocentric chart for today, which I've already shown you, but so that's not the chart I was looking for. Let's just switch to the heliocentric view. So from a heliocentric view, you can see there is Earth conjunct Jupiter. And so Earth conjunct Jupiter, this is an aspect that happens, I think, approximately every 13 months. And so Earth conjunct Jupiter, opposition Venus-Mars. Venus and Mars are opposition Jupiter. So, yeah, it is all happening. And so, what might we expect? So I just wanted to give you some examples of what can happen when Earth is conjunct Jupiter, or indeed if any planet is conjunct Jupiter. So, thinking about 1986, this is not an Earth-Jupiter chart, but it still illustrates the power of heliocentric astrology and also the power of conjunctions with the Earth. So if we look, for example, at the horoscope of the Chernobyl explosion. So here's a chart of the Chernobyl explosion. This is a heliocentric chart of Chernobyl. So this happened on April the 30th, 1986. April the 26th, 1986. I got that right? Yeah. I certainly remember Chernobyl. I remember, going out a few days afterwards, and then there were a few drops of rain in the air, and I'm thinking, wow, have I contaminated myself? It was certainly a big event, and something exploded. Okay, so we know something exploded, but something popped. This was the peak of something. And look at Earth. Earth was exactly, or pretty exactly conjunct Pluto. at sort of around 5 degrees Scorpio, heliocentric Scorpio. And there was at the same time a conjunction between Mars and Saturn, a heliocentric conjunction between Mars and Saturn at the same time as a heliocentric conjunction between the Earth and Pluto. And additionally, Jupiter was involved. There was an exact trine between Earth and Jupiter. Yeah, that's what I was thinking about. I think Michael Harding was talking about not just conjunctions. I think he was talking about trines, and I think he pointed out that there was with this Earth-Jupiter heliocentric Earth-Jupiter trine at the time of Chernobyl, and it's very, very close. And this is how you use heliocentric astrology. You don't often get an event which is so dramatic. Look at all these planets at 5. Earth-Pluto conjunction at 5 Scorpio, Jupiter at 5 Pisces, and look at the exactitude of the Earth-Jupiter trine. Jupiter was at 5 degrees 24 Pisces, Earth was at 5 degrees 22 Scorpio. So this kind of informs me as far as why we should take this Earth-Jupiter conjunction seriously. And additionally, there was a Mars-Saturn conjunction, all at 5. So this chart, which this was an important event for me. Perhaps people of a certain age who remember it. This was it happened when I was studying astrology, and it certainly is an example of a huge event, which was completely flagged by heliocentric astrology. And another huge event, which perhaps isn't remembered so much, is Black Monday. So the year after Chernobyl, this would have been about 18 months afterwards, there was a huge crash in the stock market. The indices fell by 20% in one day, and this was on October the 19th. Again, I remember that time vividly. I remember this. So here is the. Let's see. Where is Black Monday? So here's the Black Monday chart. So Black Monday took place on October the 19th. So I remember October the 17th. I was in London. On October the 17th, I got my diploma from the Faculty of Astrological Studies. So it was 2 days before I got my diploma. I remember that. I got it from Liz Green. It was at the Faculty of Astrological Studies. They had their meeting, and Liz Green was giving the main talk. And she was handing out the diplomas. So I did very briefly get to meet Liz Green. And so that was the 17th. And then there was a huge storm that weekend, massive storm. If you're in England, you will certainly remember it, if you're above a certain age. Anyone born, I'm sure, in 1987, anyone born after 1980 living in England will probably remember that storm. It was huge. And then on Monday, the stock market crashed. The global stock market crashed, and it fell by 20%. And so the sun at the time of the stock market crash was at 25 Libra. You can see it's opposition Jupiter. And so over the weekend, certainly also from a UK point of view, you had a storm, and that storm caused a huge amount of damage. A lot of trees were uprooted, roofs destroyed. I don't know how many people were killed in the storm. And it was also a storm that was the weather forecasting service got it wrong. So people underestimated how bad it was going to be. And so that's the geocentric chart for Black Monday. We can look at Black Monday heliocentrically, just to really highlight the fact that that the Earth was conjunct Jupiter. So there's the heliocentric picture for Black Monday, for when the market crashed. So there is the Earth-Jupiter conjunction, And notice how Uranus is kind of involved in it as well. So you don't just look at the conjunctions, you look at trines. So Jupiter trine Uranus, Earth trine Uranus. So, we have this Earth-Jupiter conjunction taking place, and right now. And so, I'm just trying to show you what kind of things can happen. Now, talking about weather events, I think it was a weather event. I want to another example of Earth Sun opposition Jupiter, going back some time. If you live in the Pacific Northwest, you might have heard of the Tacoma Narrows Bridge. You can look it up. You can YouTube it. It's quite impressive. You've got a film of this bridge. So Tacoma is where I am. It's the nearest big city to where I am, and Tacoma is the second biggest city in Washington State. And in 1940, there was this. I think there was a big storm, and you can see pictures of it. And it's like this bridge, and this bridge was just literally going like that, like that, like that, and then finally it collapsed. I think no one was killed. A dog was killed, but it was left in a car, I think, or something like that. And so, despite I think no one being killed, it was a whole bridge collapsed. And okay, 1940, you could say, well, that's in the middle of the Second World War, but not if you're from an American perspective. This was over a year before Pearl Harbor, so everything was still pretty quiet in the United States. And so here you have, okay, the Sun is not exactly opposition Jupiter, but it's still there. I mean, it's okay, maybe 6 degrees apart. Maybe it's not an absolutely great example, but it shows that maybe the Sun-Jupiter conjunction, the Sun-Jupiter opposition has perhaps a certain orb to it. It doesn't necessarily happen, right on time, but it kind of links with the hurricane, the weather event that happened in the UK in 1987, which coincided with the 1987 stock market crash on Black Monday. Now, over a year after the Tacoma Narrows Bridge, we had Pearl Harbor. Called Pearl Harbor, December the 7th, 1941. And so here is the regular horoscope for Pearl Harbor. So got it somewhere. Here's Pearl Harbor. So this is the chart for when the Japanese attacked the American fleet, and the Sun was at 15 degrees 16 Sagittarius. Jupiter was at 16:11 Gemini. So we have the Sun opposition Jupiter. If we think about the American chart, well, don't forget, America has, if we take the Sibley chart, the United States has the Sun has the ascendant at, about 12 degrees Sagittarius. So that Sun-Jupiter opposition was kind of on the United States' ascendant. And yeah, so we had a Sun-Jupiter opposition. And again, we've got another Sun-Jupiter opposition coming up. And, this Sun-Jupiter opposition was sort of linked with Mars as well. There was a Sun-Mars trine, which was also linked with Jupiter. And, we can look at Pearl Harbor as a heliocentric event. And from a heliocentric view, again, we have Earth. There's Earth-Jupiter. There's the Earth-Jupiter conjunction. So you can kind of see the Earth-Jupiter conjunction as you have a lot of tension building up, and the tension builds, and then bang, it finally happens. And there are other examples. An event that I look at quite a lot is the 1994 San Marino Grand Prix. So the 1994 San Marino Grand Prix, I think, took place at the end of April 1994, and at the time of the grammar of the 1994 grammar, the 1994 San Marino Grand Prix, there was an opposition between the Sun and Jupiter. And the thing about the 1994 San Marino Grand Prix was that two famous racing car drivers were killed. Firstly, there was what's his name, Ratzinger was killed, and additionally Ayrton Senna. Have I got that right? Sorry, let me get the name right. Ratzenberger. So Ratzenberger was an Austrian racing car driver, and Ayrton Senna, an incredibly famous Brazilian driver, was killed. So we had two drivers killed. So that's quite spectacular for a Grand Prix. So here's the chart for Ratzenberger's death. So Ratzenberger died in Bologna in hospital, and so at the time of his death, there is Sun at 9 degrees 55 Taurus, Jupiter at 9 degrees 46 Scorpio. So, there is an exact Sun-Jupiter opposition. And so that was on April the 30th that Ratzenberger died, and then there's Ayrton Senna died the next day. He died on the racetrack in Imola. The San Marino Grand Prix, although it's called the San Marino Grand Prix, I don't think it happens in the country of San Marino. It happens in Imola. And so here's Ayrton Senna. The Sun-Jupiter opposition is not quite as exact, but it's still pretty close. And in terms of trying to work out when that might happen, one could for example, look at the full moon prior to the crash, which took place. So this was on April the 25th. I've set the full moon for Imola. So the full moon was quite a nasty full moon with the moon at 5 degrees 22 Scorpio. In the Via Combusta, moon pretty close to its degree of maximum fall, or degree of fall. I mean, I think that's more of a Hindu astrology concept, the idea of maximum fall, but certainly 3 degrees Scorpio is where the moon has its degree of fall. And so the moon-Jupiter opposition is not exact here. The moon-Jupiter conjunction the full moon is not exactly on Jupiter. It's 5 degrees apart. So we can use that 5 degrees potentially as a symbolic measure. 5 degrees. 5 degrees, in this case, 5 days. So you have the full moon, then 5 days later, April the 30th, that's when that first accident happened involving Ratzenberger, and then on the day after was when Ayrton Senna was killed. And so that's the Imola, the San Marino Grand Prix. And another event which was very tragic was the Columbia disaster. So this was a space shuttle disaster. So the space shuttle had lost some heat shielding, fell off when the Columbia took off. So it got into space, but there was always this problem. How was it going to do its re-entry? And so it made its re-entry, and it hadn't got the shielding. And high over Texas, the Columbia disintegrated, and of course all the astronauts lost their lives. So again, with the Columbia disaster, well, this was made more intense by the fact that it happened around the time of a new moon. So the new moon was what would have been about 12 degrees Aquarius, and Jupiter. So there was a Sun-Jupiter opposition here. So heliocentrically, there we have our Sun-Jupiter conjunction, because it's tied in with. It's tied in with a new moon. So we should ideally not just look for a Sun-Jupiter opposition on its own, or if we're doing heliocentrically, looking at an Earth-Jupiter conjunction on its own. We should be looking at other things. Are there other things to indicate problems? And I would argue, going back to what is happening now, there very much are. By the way, if you want one final chart to look at, is the chart of Nord Stream 2, which, Nord Stream 2 was, don't forget, this is when probably the Americans under Biden blew up this gas pipeline between Russia and Germany. I mean, effectively destroying the German economy. It was a catastrophe. I mean, weird people, the Germans. I mean, they're allied with the Americans, and the Americans have just totally wrecked their economy. And that wasn't even under Trump, that was under Biden. Of course, there was a claim that it was the Ukrainians or someone else, but I think that the evidence seems to be that it really was the Americans that blew up the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. And so, as far as the Nord Stream 2 pipeline is concerned, we have Sun opposition Jupiter. Sun at 2 degrees 54, Jupiter at 3 degrees 48. So the Sun was applying to an opposition of Jupiter, which heliocentrically means that the Earth was making a conjunction to Jupiter. So again, from a German perspective, that was a real disaster. It really was. And it was an act of terrorism that was probably committed by the United States and by the Biden regime. And so, thinking about now, and what we have at the moment. So at the moment, right now, over the next few days, we have got Earth conjunct Jupiter. We have got this is the heliocentric chart. We've got a heliocentric Venus-Mars conjunction. I mean, this is all shown in the geocentric chart as well. But it's just, I'm preferring to look at it from a heliocentric view. If you're looking at a geocentric view, you're just seeing Sun, Venus, Mars opposition Jupiter. I like to put with the heliocentric chart. It's kind of interesting to have the Earth on Jupiter. It kind of makes it more stark, and so the Earth is caught up in this grand opposition between Jupiter on one hand, Venus and Mars on the other, and this is happening over the next few days. So I would have said that the days of sort of maximum impact are today, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And so, what should we be looking for? Well, again, nothing might happen. And I'm going to look at this again because I'm going to do my weekend video. So I'm going to kind of go over it one more time and perhaps try to be more precise. But, I'm thinking it just could be a disaster. Some disaster that we weren't thinking about that may have nothing to do with ongoing crises. But the thing is, we already know that there is stuff going on. We already know about Venezuela. We know about Ukraine. We know about Russia. We know about Iran. We know that things are really brewing. And so what the Earth-Jupiter conjunction is about is the final trigger. It's a thing that just blows everything up. And so we should be looking out for that, or we should also be looking out for structures. And you should not be doing anything which is a known danger. For example, like the San Marino Grand Prix. I mean, the San Marino Grand Prix should not have happened at a time when the Earth was conjunct Jupiter. I mean, that's obvious, but of course, I don't think the people organising Grand Prix are particularly sensitive to what's going on, astrologically. That was not astrologically a good time to be holding a Grand Prix. Or likewise with the Columbia. I mean, you should not have entered, had a re-entry timed at the time when the Earth was conjunct Jupiter, particularly when you remember that full moon. Was it the full moon? That lunation beforehand. It all fitted very. It happened on a new moon, which was on a new moon, which was. Right on Jupiter. That was not a good decision. So where you are seeing dangerous events over the weekend, potentially dangerous events, it could be racing events, it could anything which has the potential for danger. should not be done over the next few days, because it could interact with the Earth Jupiter with the Earth Jupiter conjunction, and the fact that the Earth is not just conjunct Jupiter, it's opposition Mars. So things do look pretty difficult at the moment, and so we should be expecting some disaster, I think. Now that's the bad news. The good news is, though, if we can survive the weekend, if we can survive until, say, Tuesday, and nothing bad happens, maybe we'll be over the worst, and maybe this Earth Jupiter is just the final trigger where we see things in their worst possible light, and then after that we will see improvement. But what is going to happen over the next few days? I mean, obviously, if it's that bad, it may take time for the world to recover. But again, I'm possibly exaggerating, but we should keep our eyes open and, don't do anything dangerous with this, because I do think potentially these next few days could be the most dangerous few days of the year. So thank you very much for watching this video. Sorry for the doom mongering. I'm sure that's cynics and critics of astrology will say, well, that's what astrologers do. They just like to get attention, and of course nothing bad will happen, will it, anyway? So so thanks very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.